another SonicLAB. Today I'm following up on a sort of brief first look I did of the IK Multimedia Uno Synth Pro X. Those of you who've been following these things will know that this came out a couple of weeks ago and all the YouTubers hit their deadlines. I didn't, but I've got a broken wrist and a fancy new cast, I might add. I'm fine, thank you for your concern, in case you were concerned. So here we have it. This is the Uno Synth Pro X. Essentially, this is it's like a development of the original Uno Synth Pro. I reviewed the Uno Synth Pro, I had the keyboard version, and I really liked the sound of it. And one of the major criticisms from a lot of reviewers was the UI was just kind of a bit impenetrable and a bit parameter-y, if there's such a word. And I guess what they've done is they've addressed that. So the Uno Synth Pro X is essentially, although not exactly, the same synth engine. Unfortunately, at the moment, you can't swap patches between them, but what you do get is just a lot of UI, so knob per function to a degree, although there are quite a lot of shift functions still here. It's just a lot more near the surface, so we can see it all. This is the same form factor as the original Uno Synth Pro Desktop, which had a capacitive touch keybed and a couple of ribbon strips, and then all the parameter stuff up here. They've also made this a kind of more of a solid, I guess it's aluminium. We've got a USB-C power input, and that also deals with the kind of selection to the connection to the editor. Although this actually did come with a power supply, which is a nice, nice to see. So essentially, this is, like I say, a development of the original Uno Synth Pro, which, as I said, I thought was pretty good. So I'm not going to do a full review of this because I reviewed the Uno Synth Pro in its entirety, and there are lots of similarities. However, there are some differences. Apart from the obvious layout one, we've also got a third envelope accessed by shift. So I'll just take that out. So envelope 1 is amplitude, envelope 1 is filter, envelope 2 is amplitude, then envelope 3, which is flashing, is assignable, a mod envelope, and these all loop. 2 LFOs, 3 effect slots. As with the previous one, we've got dedicated control of those, and there's also they've changed around some of the algorithms a little bit. There's also this thing called Bassline Mode, which kind of takes it more into 303 territory, and that's also another reason, I guess, why we've got more space dedicated to the sequencer. I'm not fully, convinced that having a sequencer on a synth like this is better than maybe having more controls for synthesis. We'll see, won't we? So if I just bring this all up, you could see we've got, there's a little keyboard here, which gives us an octave, which we can plus or minus. Not great, if I'm honest. You're probably going to want to play this with an external keyboard. So let's take a look at the waves. We've done all this, but I just wanted to show you how similar it is, because here we have the triangle, and you can see in the triangle there's that little kind of kink in it, which is a bit of bleed from the sawtooth, which was what we also had in the original. So they haven't changed much. This has got something to do with the gain structure, which they wanted, because we can gain this up quite heavily, and the drive into the filter is one of the sort of main characteristics of this instrument. Right, we sweep round, through into sawtooth, then into square, and then we can modulate the square. 3 of these are plus and minus. 24 semitones with 100 cents in between. That's great, but if you wanted to, say, tune something an octave and a few cents out of tune, you'd have to sort of do it by tuning the other oscillator to the interval that you want. We've got mono, we've got legato, and we've got paraphonic, so we can have 3 voices, or not 3 voices, 3 oscillators here, which will give us, well, 3 notes, essentially, which we can tune however we wish. But it does allow you to play some chords and stuff, and I did make some lovely patches, I thought they were lovely anyway, for the original Uno Synth Pro, which sort of featured in paraphonic mode, and you could get some really dreamy, sort of ambient chords out of it. We've also got oscillator sync, as with the original. I've got a little patch here, which I'll load up. I haven't named any of these yet, but I will make them available to our Patreons once we get there. And what I've done here is I've synced oscillator 2, but I've got the various mod slots, because we've got the same mod slots, which are actually much easier to assign, so we can hit them up with, I'm using 4 mod slots. I think the first one is, let's see, I've got velocity to filter envelope depth, the second one is velocity to drive amount, third one is oscillator 2 sync tune, and then the fourth one is the depth of that one. So we've got the same number of 16 mod slots, and we can create some really nice routings. You can actually affect the depth of previous mod slot. So all of that stuff is essentially the same. And again, if I come back to the filter, I'm using the filter in, we've got, as in the original, we've got 2 filters, an OTA-based filter and also an SSI resonant 2 or 4 pole filter. So I'll just bring an init patch up, which is just, we'll go 1 oscillator into the OTA. This doesn't go full resonance, but it's got a sort of quite a nice sort of quacky quality. You can change the amount of drive that goes into that filter to a degree. Let's bring the second filter up, which is the SSI. One thing you will notice is there's actually the default patch, which is a bit annoying actually. There's some default mappings in the default patch. Let's see, after touch to filter 2, I want to basically take that out because I find that a bit distracting. And that's one criticism I have actually while I'm on the subject. Would be really nice to be able to save a default patch so that it had, you know, the default, when you initted a patch or loaded a default patch, it has this sort of basic setting, so it doesn't have, say, aftertouch map or, you know, aftertouch mapped or whatever it is that you don't want. It'd be nice to see that. Anyway, I digress. So here we have, let's go. It's a bit creamier, isn't it, this one? Still got a kind of quite an angry vibe to it. Some really nice harmonics. I'm sorry, I'm using the effects there. And we can, if we take this down, we can go into full resonance. And by pressing shift, we can set the tracking amount to 100%. If you skip it, using the data knob will give you a much finer control, so we get that to 100%. Again, I don't think I want any. Let's have a look. Does this give us an octave? Yeah, not quite that sort of pristine tracking. You know, we're not going to get multiple octaves out of it, but you can track the filter to a degree. What's really interesting about the filters, though, is the fact that we've got these, the ability to, they run in series or parallel. So let's just go to, let's actually bring this up, take the, so we can sort of, if we link them, let's bring a bit of resonance in. We've got like a double filter, but if we set the first one to be low pass, we can essentially set a variable width bandpass filter, and if we link those, get some interesting, we can change the difference. And if we then go to parallel mode, we essentially got a notch filter. Get some quite nice sort of vowely sounds out of them. We can also change this phase of that, as with the original, between 0 degrees and 180 degrees. which again gives us additional characteristics. Now I must say, these filters aren't any different to what was on the Uno Synth Pro. I just wanted to kind of show you again, because what's really nice about them, even though we don't have a fully resonant OTA filter, there's some really nice little nooks and crannies and sort of resonant sort of places to explore. And it's one of the things that make this synth sound sort of quite interesting. Well, add to that, we've also got a post-filter drive, which will take you into kind of full-on Chemical Brothers, angry 303, angry MS-20, you know, you decide. It'll do that stuff as well. In fact, a lot of the patches are like that in here, but I think actually it's capable of much more subtlety than that, if I'm honest. Just one little tip on the filter, it's actually quite sensitive to the amount of stuff that's going into it. So if we just go here, we take this patch here, which is lovely. I'll bypass those effects. Shift and effects will bypass all the effects. Nice little touch there. And then pressing and holding the oscillator buttons will now control all of the oscillators simultaneously. So you can hear, as I get past sort of 3 o'clock, it starts to burn into the filter, but back a bit, 80 and below, it means that we're not going to get any drive into the filter. We can still add that drive afterwards, but that is actually driving into the filter. So if you want it clean, just hold back a little bit and it'll work out fine. So here's, as I mentioned, we can make some nice pads. Here's what I would say is quite a nice pad. Excuse my playing, I was really quite hard with this cast on. And that's demonstrating the effects nicely. Let's just try. There's another patch that's just demonstrate the sort of thunder that you can get from the bass. These are all patches, like I say, that I've just sort of created. I haven't named them. Here's another. I've got the filter doing linked, and it's doing some really interesting. I've also got the delay and the feed. Yeah, there's basically everything on there. But I'll play a few more patches throughout this overview, but I just wanted to give you a sense of, you know, the original had these really nice, I mean, quite contrarily, I quite enjoyed the fact that the interface was a bit obtuse, because it made me work a bit harder to find some of the sounds. And I thought, anyway, some really lovely sounds in the original Uno Synth Pro. And with the Pro X, that brings it all kind of more to the forefront. There's just a lot to find here. It's very easy just to kind of go, make it sound like a distorted 303, which you certainly can. But there's lots of other really nice stuff in there as well. Let's get on to a few more of the differences. So this is another nice sort of paraphonic pat. Let's bring a bit of that Shimmer algorithm, which is new. So I'll just, before I do that, we've got Hall, Plate, and Shimmer, which is the new algorithm, and this is actually... It's really nice to be able to filter these down. You can get some really nice dark sound. Very nice. In fact, if we go to the, let's see if we go back and we go to parameter, and we'll just bring up some of the effects parameters. Certainly for the Shimmer, we've got different pitch. Different pitch algorithms. We could go into sort of interesting. It's create some sort of slightly dissonant stuff. I really like the diffusion setting, and that's one thing that would be really nice to be able to do actually while I'm here. If we set up, let's try and set up a LFO1, and then we'll send that to mod amount. Just unfortunately we still can't modulate some of these parameters, and I think some of these, being able to modulate some of these would be really nice for the mod matrix and open up some kind of really interesting stuff. But you can't. You can only really do the send level, which I think they missed the trick. I don't know, maybe the DSP is just not designed to have those going on and it might crash something. I don't know, but I'd love to see some of those parameters being brought into the synthesis. Anyway, I was going to talk about what I've got is filter envelope looping. So if I shift, set that to loop, and then we can do, again, some great stuff, and all of those envelopes loop. I suppose that's the looping part isn't new, but the fact there's 3 of them means that we can create some quite complicated LFO style stuff. Conversely though, it's not possible to have the LFOs go into one-shot mode. Let's have a look. We'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure LFOs are just wave rate, and we can fade them in. Actually, that's good. We can fade those, each of the LFOs in, and we can sync in them, and we've got the fade curve, we've got the retrigger, but there's no one-shot mode. So here's my nice little sequence. This is actually a 64-step sequence because we've got 4 blocks of 16. We can actually make that just 16 length, or 32, or 48, or indeed less, depending on however we want it, really. We'll go back to 64 because that's the way I like to. Now, most sequences I've come across, you could set the step length. So if you have just 16 steps, you could set them to quarter notes, which will give you a large number of bars. It's obviously decrease the resolution, but gives you a longer time to evolve, because we can also record parameter moves in here and whatnot. So that's actually quite handy. The other mode is bassline mode. So I press my sequence and I'm going to press the bassline button. And you can hear we get a bit more envelope, a bit more drive. And also we can put accents on certain notes. Let's actually change that to 16 length. And then we've got control. We've got control over the accent decay and the accent, which is a sort of boost / filter depth as well. So that gives us more of a kind of 303 vibe, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that if you want that sort of thing from 303, but it just feels like a 3 oscillator mono synth with this many features can do 303 anyway. We don't need a button for it. But I mean, I suppose it's a nice touch, maybe a bit gimmicky. I don't know whether that's going a bit too far. So let's just flip through a few presets and get an idea of the kind of range of sounds that are possible with this thing. Incidentally, you can actually set this so that when you load a preset, it'll ask you whether you want to load the sequence and the program, or just so that it loads straight up. I prefer this way just because then you're just literally one button and you're in. So let's just go down. Let's see what preset number 1 is all about, because that's usually 256, by the way. Let's see what this one sounds like. Sort of reverby and delayed bass sound, which is, probably can't hear that in here, but it's shaking the room, which is kind of what you want, isn't it? aftertouch to filter. Heavy on the effects, which I suppose I can't really complain about, seeing as that's what I tend to go. This is showing the arpeggiator. Let's just turn that on. Mod wheel is mapped to the effects sends. A little bit too much for my liking, but side bass. And again, I'll just bring that down a little bit. Again, this has got, you could see there is a lot of low-end action down there, which may not come through on YouTube, but I'm telling you, it's there. Sync. I like that, that's got a bit of delay send on the mod wheel, which is quite effective. Nice. This would be some sort of paraphonic, I'm presuming. Actually, it's in, yeah, it's in legato. What happens if we go into paraphonic mode? Ooh, weird, because I think we've got, yeah, it looks like there's maybe ring mod between oscillator 2 and 3, so we've got some and a little bit of filter action on the mod wheel. Sounds massive though, doesn't it? I mean, fills a lot of space. There we go, this one's called Bow Beats, or I don't know whether this is a particularly bow-like patch, but nice to have your name immortalised, isn't it, in patches? Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Here's a paraphonic voice. That delay is actually really nice. So one thing worth mentioning is if we go to delay, the feedback amount, which is usually this, only goes up to 80. So we can't get continual sort of endless regenerating feedback. Not sure why that is, maybe it just doesn't respond very well. I don't know how hard they're making the DSP work in this thing. Back to presets. Super Saw. Crikey, can you imagine that in some sort of modern, maybe Gary Newman album, possibly. Can imagine some sort of pop anthem using the sequence on this. Quite nice. I think I played this a little earlier. I do come back to it. I love the sound of, they sound like they're triangle waved, with a bit of portamento on them. Obviously put a bit of drive on there. So anyway, there's a few sounds for you to get a kind of more of an idea of what it's capable of. Yes, it will do the sort of 303 angry stuff, but there are some nice little sort of ambient moments, well, quite a lot of ambient moments in there, because those effects are really quite tasty. So really we're sort of getting into the kind of the nitty-gritty, the crunch time. Do I think it's worth the money? Because this is a little bit more expensive than the original. This is priced around £5.8 to £5.20 UK pounds, sort of street price. I guess that's going to be somewhere around 600 US dollars. I mean, you can still buy in a few places the Uno Synth Pro, which I still think is a great synth. And if you don't need all that extra interface, then you can still get a lot of the sounds. I mean, but this is actually a nice little instrument. So if hands-on kind of nitty-gritty programming is your thing, then all of that extra control will certainly get you much more in-depth of what is a very capable synth engine, and one that I would heartily recommend. If, however, you just want to flip presets and tweak the filter, then you might want to look at the desktop version of the Uno Synth Pro, which I think is still available, though I don't know for how much longer. Also, if you want a keyboard version of this, unfortunately you're out of luck. The Uno Synth Pro X currently is only available in this format. Anyhow, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, I'll be putting all the patches I've made up here on Patreon, because I'll be using the editor to get that, which I didn't get into, but it works and is great for a synth librarian. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time. Take care.